gentlemen, welcome to another installment of KMullinsTV's coverage of the March Madness tournament. Well, we've gone all the way down to the tournament. We started with 64. We are down to 8. The final 8 teams are left in the tournament. As over the next 2 days, we are going to decide who goes to the Final Four in New Orleans. We're covering the entire Elite 8, and I'm also going to give you my thoughts on the Sweet 16 matchups that have happened so far, because I definitely have a lot of big thoughts about those matchups. I hope you enjoy the show. The first matchup we're going to talk about here is the Florida Gators versus the Louisville Cardinals. Two very exciting teams to watch play. And even though I'm a Gators fan, I'm going to be definitely pushing for the Gators here. The Louisville Cardinals could give them quite a scare in the Elite 8 here and move on to the Final Four. They very well could. The Gators have plenty of shooters that are really encouraged to launch from the perimeter by Coach Billy Donovan. They lead the nation with an average of 9.7 3-pointers per game. And all their starters average double figures, but their guards Kenny Boynton, Irvin Walker, and Bradley Beal spearhead this whole attack. All their starters average in double figures, but those three are the definite big-time guys. Boynton averages 16 points per game. He's their top guy with 108 3-pointers. Beal is an all-SEC selection as a freshman this year. He's really been impressive. If you have not seen him play yet, definitely check out this game tonight. And he's really been playing great and has increased his production in the tournament, actually. He's averaging now in the tournament 16.3 points a game and 8.7 rebounds a game. Irvin Walker is a converted shooting guard, and he leads the team in assists. And Eric Murphy is a guy I've been definitely reading on a lot lately. Eric Murphy is a guy who's about 6'10", and he can drop threes just as well as anyone on this team. He kind of reminds me of, I guess you would say, Dirk Nowitzki, Peja Stojakovic. He's definitely a white guy that has a good jump shot. And although it looks kind of goofy, he drops it every damn time. Guy can play and outshoot. The Gators are going to try to speed up this game because they definitely have a lot more speed than Louisville. They're going to try to take advantage of that by speeding up this game with 3, sometimes even 4 guards sharing the ball on the floor at the same time. Louisville has a 7-game win streak that has been sparked by defense, and it's highlighted by they defeated in the Sweet 16 Tom Izzo's very good Michigan State team. No one thought they could do it, but they did it, and they moved on, and now they're 1 win away from the Final Four. This will be their first Final Four in 8 seasons. Last time they made it, they did not win in the Final Four. They just made it to the Final Four, but that was as far as they went. The big matchup here is going to be the defenses, basically, though. As Louisville's defense, their last 5 opponents, they've held them to an average of 51.2 points per game. And the matchup zone completely diffused the Michigan State offense, which is very hard to do because Michigan State was one of those teams that would score at will almost. And it limited the Spartans to 28.6% shooting, and it forced 15 turnovers. And center Goruj Ding, I hope I got that correctly. I'm sorry if I did not, but Ding shut down the lane. He had 7 blocks over Michigan State, which is a team that loves to attack the rim. And that was just one of those things. The Cardinals, though, I'm going to talk about the Cardinals for a little bit. Continue talking about them. The Cardinals are basically a typical Pitino team. They grind out points through turnovers and the creativity of their point guard. They let the point guard basically run the team. This is basically how every other Louisville team, and even back when he was with Kentucky and with the Celtics even, this is the way Pitino's teams have always run. Their point guard runs through everything and is basically the man on the court. He's the field general, the court general, I guess you would call him there. They only have 2 double-digit scorers. I've already gone over this before. Kyle Kuric and Russ Smith, Russ Smith has averaged 14 points per game in the last 2 tournament victories. Freshman Shane Bohannon had 15 points in Louisville's upset of top seed Michigan State. Chris Smith is the only above-average 3-point shooter. I've already gone over this before. Just restating that if they have to make threes, they better not get in a 3-point contest with Florida. Plain and simple. Although they got guys that can shoot the 3, Florida has much more firepower from behind the arc, and I would not want to get in a 3-point shooting contest with Florida. or you're going to see yourself on the outside looking in when Florida's heading to New Orleans and you're not. Otherwise, the Cardinals really look to score off their defensive pressure. They look to force turnovers and basically score off those turnovers. They're averaging 15.5 points per game off turnovers. The Gators, though, basically play man-to-man throughout the entire game. They'll try to keep Florida off balance and speed up the tempo because, like I was telling you, Florida has a higher speed than them. And basically, Florida ranked near the bottom in the defensive category, but have gotten much better in the tournament, limiting opponents to 31.5% shooting, and Patrick Young will provide that inside presence that will be able to maybe halt down that Dieng and the rest of the inside game for the Louisville Cardinals. Basically, the Cardinals are in a run right now that is going to try to duplicate what happened with last year's national champion, if you remember. It was Connecticut, who wasn't really hot. They were just kind of middle of the pack, right there. And then all of a sudden, the team took off, won the Big East tournament, and then won the national title. The Cardinals already got that Big East title. Now they're heading for the national one. And they carried their momentum through that and basically went all the way. They won both their tournaments. They were in the postseason last year with the Huskies. And Louisville's trying to repeat the same. So basically, the Gators are going to try to counter their defense with the three-point prowess, and if they can find a way to create space for their shooters with pick-and-roll and dribble drives, I'm going to look straight into this and say that the Gators will walk out of this with a win if Louisville cannot find a stop for these three-point shooters. That is the biggest key to the game, is the three-point shooters. My pick for this game, the Florida Gators. In the matchup against Wisconsin, basically, Syracuse, the biggest weapon used against Syracuse was the three-pointer. Wisconsin made 14 threes that accounted for 42 of its 63 points. That's not the way the Buckeyes work. The Buckeyes work more on the inside with Deshaun Thomas and Jared Sullinger, two sophomore forwards that have been playing very good basketball as of late. The two combined for 79 points in Ohio State's first two games against Loyola and Gonzaga. And then they added 49 altogether in the Sweet 16 defeat of in-state rival Cincinnati. Not surprisingly, the Buckeyes were first in offensive rebounding with 11.9 in the Big Ten. And senior guard William Buford, 14.7 points per game, is the third of three primary scoring options and averaged 4.8 rebounds a game and 2.8 assists per game. Faced with a less trigger-happy foe, Syracuse will quite likely go back to their 2-3 zone that has been a hallmark for that team and been the trademark for this team in the way they run their offense and defense. They're going to run the zone. Their zone is like I was telling you before, it's something that most coaches don't break out of have that type of zone because it basically shuts down everything, and there's really no scoring you can do prolifically against a team like that when the zone is working correctly. Syracuse typically allows about 60 points per game, and then the Buckeyes are generally good for about 75. So it basically is going to be a bend but don't break scenario. It's going to be who's going to bend and who's going to break, and whoever breaks is going to be the team that doesn't move on to New Orleans. The Orange basically have been working with score by committee lately, especially in the squeaking by Wisconsin. They got double-digit figures from 4 players and shot 55% as a unit, nearly 17% better than the average output by the Badgers' opponents. Syracuse's sophomore forward, C.J. Fair, made 7 shots in the win after making just 7 shots in their previous 6 games. Having him as a reliable option will lessen the blow that basically was caused by Fab Melo's disqualification from the tournament as ineligibility deal goes on with him. And I still don't know what actually happened with that ineligibility. They never really said, but whatever it is, it really hasn't affected the Syracuse Orange as bad as everyone thought it was going to. Syracuse was second in the Big East in scoring with 74.5 points per game and fifth in three-point shooting with 34.5%. And they committed just the second fewest turnovers per game in the Big East with 10.6. Defensively, Ohio State remains tough in many facets, though. The Buckeyes ended the tournament 11th nationally in opposition scoring, with 58.5 points per game given up, 55th in field goal percentage with 40.7, and have surrendered 59, 66, and 66 games in their 3 games that they've played so far in this NCAA tournament. They're 39.6 rebounds per game. We're second in the Big Ten, and 7.1 steals per game. We're tied for the lead. This is the first regional final that's playing out in the chalk style, which basically is the top seeds advancing. This is a 1 versus a 2. As you saw from the first Friday of the season, 2 number 2s went down, but the 2 that are left both made the Elite 8. And this time we're going to talk about this 1-2 matchup with basically Jared Sullinger is a lottery pick, and Thomas is an emerging star for the Buckeyes, while the Orange have done more than the credible job of filling the role left by Mello when he was rendered ineligible. So they've done a really good job of running that zone defense and running that team without the 7-footer Mello. Ohio State's Thomas and Buford are a trifle more prolific than the Orange's best, but the pair has fewer cohorts capable of the success from distance. The single most important player is likely to be tough and consistent. Jared Sullinger, he is the player that's going to matter the most. It says that here that his production will be the difference to the game, unlikely to exceed the 60s. So, but in a game that's going to not be very high scoring, Jared Sullinger's is the key to the game. As basically, if he gets going, Ohio State could be on their way to the Final Four. In a game that's oozing with NBA potential and future NBA players, we got the Baylor Bears versus the Kentucky Wildcats. In defeat, Indiana may have given Baylor the blueprint to victory over Kentucky, even though they didn't pull off it themselves. Fearlessly attacked Kentucky and forced them into a high-octane pace, and that could very well disrupt a Kentucky team that's more of a slower pace, more of a methodical type deal. But that's really easier said than done. It worked for the Hoosiers in the first half on Friday. They shot 58% from the field, but Indiana lacked the horses that Baylor has. And sophomore phenom Perry Jones III and tournament breakout Quincy Acey, who has 20 points and 15 rebounds in their win over Xavier in the Sweet 16. They have the size and NBA caliber to match up with the freshman big men Michael Kid Gilchrist and Anthony Davis. They have the best matchup for the Kentucky Wildcats right here to be able to take them down. If Kentucky does not lose here, it's going to be you very well might be able to see John Calipari get his first title, as Kentucky will get a title this year if basically if Baylor is not able to disrupt this, because Baylor has the best chance of doing anything. And I don't see anyone else on this whole thing. Even my Florida Gators I've already lost twice to them. I don't really know if anyone's going to be able to beat them if Baylor can't pull it off right here. Basically, what's going to happen here is their big men. Davis has an NCAA record of 169 blocks this year, which is insane. It's averaging out to about 7.5 blocks per game, which is just... You can't even fathom that kind of stuff, much less actually see it. That's the centerpiece of the defense that held opponents to just 37% shooting from the field this season during the regular season. He, Kid Gilchrist, and Ford Terrence Jones each averaged at least 7 rebounds, a steal, and a block per game. The Bears will look to the long-range snipers of Brady Hayslip, who really had a coming-out party a couple games ago, as he scored 27 points all off 9 3-pointers. So basically, it's going to come down to him and Pierre Jackson, who are their long-range snipers for Baylor. They're going to have to stretch out this Wildcats D in order to let Jones and Acey attack the rim against Davis. The Bears can light up the scoreboard, yet attempting it against the Wildcats is simply playing with fire, because if you play Can You Top This with Kentucky, Kentucky will top you, and you'll be sent packing, and Kentucky will move on to New Orleans. It's all about New Orleans this week. You got to worry about how to get to New Orleans, and playing Can You Top This with Kentucky is not one way. They basically have A diverse attack features 4 players with Davis, Jones, Kidd-Gilchrist, and guard Doran Lamb that average double figures, with guards Darius Miller and Marquise Teague averaging almost 10 points, a little bit under 10 points per game, respectively. That's an awful lot of firepower for Baylor, which had fewer blocks as a team than Davis by himself to contend with. At 6'7", AC will be undersized in the matchup against Davis, as he will be the guy that will probably put on Davis, but his heart and intensity will allow him to hold his own here. As good as the Bears' guards are on the offensive end, they could struggle against the aggressive Wildcats backcourt, especially when Miller, the 6'8" shooting guard, comes off the bench. As Friday showed, getting Davis into foul trouble only means John Calipari unleashes another weapon that will try to break his opponent's will. Kentucky's peaking at the right time here, as the Wildcats can either they've learned to grind out victories, or push the tempo and blow past victories. With a roster brimming with future NBA talent, there's going to be so much NBA talent, you're going to be watching basically an NBA Futures game tomorrow when you watch this Baylor-Kentucky game. And they could be getting their first national championship since 1996 this year if Baylor can't stop them, basically, because I don't think that there's going to be a team that can stop them if Baylor can't beat them tonight. The Bears may not have the bunch of eventual millionaires that Kentucky has with all these NBA talent. They have a couple, but not as many. While they may not have all that, they are an athletic team with a diverse offense that will be able to push Kentucky and that's a huge one, they can avoid mental mistakes that plagued them in the Xavier game toward the end. It's almost like they were trying to let Xavier back into the game. But that is the big key, that basically they need to lock out all mental aspects of the game and be able to just concentrate strictly on beating Kentucky and not on who Kentucky is, and not get riled up mentally, because that will definitely cause some trouble for them in this game, as they were troubled against Xavier, and Xavier's not even as prolific as Kentucky. So if it comes down to mental aspects, pick Kentucky, but I believe that Baylor will lock all that out, and by strong three-point shooting from Jackson, Miller, Jones, and Hayslip, I believe that the Baylor Bears are moving on to their first Final Four, I believe, ever. Book it. The next matchup on here is another chalk matchup. It's number 2 seed Kansas versus number 1 seed North Carolina. The Jayhawks entered the tournament 14th nationally in field goal percentage, but have been anything but that dynamic team at the tournament so far in the past week. Kansas failed to crack 65 points through the first 3 games, as forward Thomas Robinson was only 16 of 42 combined field goals, and guard Tyshawn Taylor was 11 of 33 on combined field goals, which is not very usual for this Kansas team. Meantime, the North Carolina defense is way better than it's given credit for. The Tar Heels entered the tournament allowing just 66.8 points per game, as they ranked 23rd nationally in opponent field goal percentage, and were sparkling 67th in three-point field goal percentage defense. And North Carolina opened the tournament giving up just 58 points in their first-round matchup against Vermont, smothered one of the nation's top attacks in Creighton in a victory that was 87-73 over Creighton, and gave up a mere just 2 points in their Sweet 16 victory over the Ohio Bobcats. The Tar Heels, though, are not the same without guard Kendall Marshall. The sophomore fractured his right wrist with the game against Creighton, and missed the game against Ohio completely. North Carolina was taken to overtime in that game versus Ohio and shot a mere 40%, as it committed 24 turnovers, which is very untypical for a team that usually takes care of the ball pretty well. Forward Harrison Barnes looked anything but a lottery pick against the Bobcats, as he scored 12 points on just 3 of 16 shooting, which that means he basically scored most of his points from the three-point line. And the Kansas defense will be a stiff test for North Carolina, as the Jayhawks have not allowed more than 60 points in the NCAA tournament so far. The Big 12 power entered the competition yielding a mere 61.5 points per game, as it held its opponents to just 38.1% shooting this season. The game will feature some of the top post play in the tournament. Kansas is 11th in the country in blocked shots with about 5.6 per game. And Thomas Robinson is second in the country in rebounding with 11.8 rebounds per game. The Tar Heels will counter with forward John Henson, who is ninth nationally in block shots with 2.97 and 18th in rebounding with 10.1. And center Tyler Zeller, who was the star against Ohio, he was the breakout guy against Ohio. He finished with 20 points and 20 rebounds and 5 blocks. And also, don't forget to look out for Kansas center Jeff Withey, who has 17 blocks through the 3 tournament games, including 10 in a win over NC State. This will be a physical game, which if it's physical, it will favor Kansas, which has won its past 2 games by a combined 6 points, and knows what it takes to thrive in a chaotic late game situation. I don't believe it's going to be that close, though, because I believe that North Carolina will right the ship, even without Kendall Marshall, and North Carolina will move on to the Final Four in New Orleans. So there you have it. That's my Elite 8 picks for the games that are between today and tomorrow. So I guess that all we have to do is sit back and see what happens and who's going to New Orleans and who's not. Either way, it's going to be a very interesting next couple games of basketball, as we only have the 4 games left plus 3 more. We only have 7 games left of the tournament that started a couple weeks ago and has been the most chaotic thing ever, it seems. As we've seen history as the two seeds went down, we've seen 1 seeds get pushed to the brink, but they still ended up coming out on top. We've seen all kinds of craziness happen. We saw the 4 Ohio teams in the Sweet 16. Never before has that ever happened. I believe this has been one of the more entertaining tournaments of all time. And this is definitely going to be something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, and you might very well remember it too for the rest of yours. Well, as always, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. I'll see you Monday for my preview for the Final Four. Woo, woo, woo. You know it. I'm Chris, and that's what's up.